Imagine standing before a stone wall carved thousands of years ago, symbols etched by hands long turned to dust, whispers left behind by minds we can no longer ask. What were they trying to say? Was it poetry, law, warnings, or perhaps songs meant only for the stars? These are the mysteries of undeciphered languages, the voices of civilizations still echoing, but forever half muted. Now, I want to ask you something. If you could hold just one of these lost texts in your hands and finally read it, which ancient mystery would you choose to unlock? Would it be the cryptic symbols of the Indus Valley, the whispered riddles of Rongorongo from Easter Island, or perhaps the enigmatic Voynich manuscript that defies every attempt at reason? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which puzzle calls out to you most. And while you're here, remember to like this video, share it with someone who also loves unraveling mysteries, and subscribe to Mindpiece so you never miss the quiet unfolding of the world's hidden stories. Now, let's step gently into the silence of forgotten voices. Have you ever felt the weight of silence? Not the ordinary kind, the pause in conversation, the quiet of an empty room, but a silence stretched across centuries, pressed into stone, etched into clay, carved into wood. A silence so heavy, it feels alive. That is the silence of undeciphered languages. When we look at the ruins of an ancient city, we see walls, pillars, and fragments of daily life. But when we come across symbols, strange, twisting marks, lines that don't resemble anything we know, that is where the heart begins to beat faster. Those marks are not decoration. They are thoughts. They are sentences. They are entire worlds that belong to people who lived and breathed as we do now, yet their voices remain sealed behind the mystery of their scripts. Think of the Indus Valley civilization, thriving 4,000 years ago, bustling with trade, architecture, and order. They left behind seals carved with delicate symbols, fish-like shapes, plants, geometric patterns, hundreds of them. But to this day, no one knows what they mean. Are they names? Are they prayers? Are they lists of goods traded? Entire generations of scholars have tried to crack the code, yet the silence persists. The Indus script remains a locked door, and we are left standing before it with no key. And then, there is the eerie case of Rongorongo, carved into wooden tablets on Easter Island. Curved glyphs flow like a river, repeating in patterns, telling stories no one can read. Some say they are chants, others claim they are genealogies, and some even suggest they could have been astronomical records, maps of the sky itself. Imagine an entire culture isolated in the vast Pacific, leaving us this one gift of their voice, only for it to become a riddle. Perhaps the most haunting of all is the Voynich manuscript, a book filled with drawings of plants that don't exist, astronomical charts of strange constellations, and paragraphs of looping, alien letters that defy every codebreaker. Some call it a hoax, but its depth, its structure, and its rhythm suggest otherwise. It feels intentional, written for someone, or something, with a meaning that still waits in the shadows. The unread word has weight. A story written but not understood becomes heavier with every century that passes. The people who wrote these texts are gone. Their cities have turned to dust, but their words remain, staring back at us, demanding that we listen. And we try. With algorithms, with linguists, with cryptographers. But no matter how advanced we become, some words resist. They hide behind silence, and that silence becomes a haunting echo. It makes you wonder, what if one of those unread words was the key to something essential? What if the Indus script contains their explanation for why they vanished? What if Rongorongo holds their version of history that would change how we see ourselves? What if the Voynich manuscript isn't nonsense at all, but a guide, a secret, a book not meant for us, but somehow left in our hands? This is the strange beauty of undeciphered languages. They are alive not because we can read them, but because we cannot. Their mystery breathes life into them. The unread word carries more power than the read one, because it carries possibility. And maybe the silence itself is part of the message. Picture yourself walking through an archaeological site. The sun is low, spilling golden light across weathered ruins. Dust rises with each step, and the world feels ancient, as though time itself has slowed to a whisper. Suddenly, among the rubble, you see it, a carved mark, just one, perhaps a swirl etched into a broken tablet, or a jagged line pressed into clay. At first, it looks like nothing, just a scratch, an accidental trace. But then you realize it repeats. It is intentional. It is deliberate. Someone wanted it there. That is the moment when symbols first reveal themselves. The first glimpse of an undeciphered language always feels like stumbling onto a secret door. The archaeologist kneels down, brushes away centuries of dust, and stares at marks left by hands that have been gone for thousands of years. These are not random scratches. They are thoughts captured in shape, frozen in time. The human brain instantly hungers for meaning. We are creatures who cannot stand silence. When we see a symbol, our minds rush to assign it a sound, a word, a purpose. We imagine what it could mean. We guess, we dream. It is in our nature to connect dots, to make patterns. And yet, with undeciphered languages, every pattern collapses into mystery. The Indus Valley seals offer us this first glimpse. Imagine finding a tiny square of stone or clay, no bigger than your palm, carved with an animal, a bull, an elephant, a fish, and above it, a short sequence of symbols. Always short, always concise, 3 to 6 characters. Enough to suggest meaning, but never enough to explain. Were these business tags, stamping goods in a trade network? Or were they sacred emblems, a code shared only among priests? We may never know, but the moment those seals were found, humanity stared into the silence of an ancient word. On Easter Island, when the first missionaries encountered the wooden tablets of Rongorongo, they too saw repeating patterns. Curved figures lined up neatly, arranged in rows, almost like a story flowing from one end of the wood to the other. They recognized that it was writing, or at least something like writing. But when they asked the islanders to read it, most no longer could. The chain of knowledge had broken. What was once alive, spoken, sung and passed down, had been silenced by time. And so the first glimpse became a permanent mystery. The Voynich manuscript is different. Imagine turning fragile pages filled with greenish ink drawings of plants that don't exist. Imagine finding entire sections of looping letters, dense paragraphs where every symbol follows rules, yet no symbol belongs to any alphabet you know. The first glimpse of this book feels like holding a dream in your hands. Familiar enough to believe it should make sense, alien enough to know it does not. What is striking about all these first glimpses is how quickly they awaken questions we cannot answer. If you could read them, what would they say? Would it be mundane or profound? Would it be a shopping list or the philosophy of a civilization? Would it be nothing more than names or everything? Cosmology, myths, law, and love all woven together. The first glimpse of symbols is both a gift and a curse. It proves that there is meaning locked within. It shows us that a language existed, but it also slams the door in our face. The marks are there, yet their voice is gone. And this paradox, the closeness of meaning, paired with its distance, is what haunts those who study undeciphered languages. Every mark feels like a whisper, almost audible, like hearing someone speak through a wall you cannot break. You know they are speaking. You know the words are there, but you cannot cross the silence. And so, the first glimpse of symbols is the spark that ignites centuries of curiosity. It makes us restless. It makes us obsessed. It makes us stare at a single carved line for hours, believing, hoping, aching for it, to finally open its mouth and speak. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the hand that first carved these marks. Not the stone, not the tablet, not the papyrus. Imagine the person. Picture their breath, steady and slow as they leaned over their work. Perhaps they sat on a mat woven from reeds, or at a wooden table lit by oil lamps. Perhaps the smell of clay hung in the air, damp and earthy, as they pressed a sharp tool into its surface. Or maybe it was the crisp scent of fresh papyrus, ink bleeding into fibers as their brush danced across the page. Every symbol we now find, forgotten and silent, was once alive in the hand of a scribe. The marks were not abstract then. They were not puzzles. They were language. They carried sound. They carried urgency. They carried life. The scribe was not working in silence. Around them, the world breathed. Markets bustled. Children laughed. Fires crackled. Yet in that quiet space of creation, their mind turned thought into shape. The curl of a symbol, the sharpness of an angle, the repetition of a pattern. None of it was random. It was the rhythm of speech caught in lines. When we look at undeciphered languages today, we see cold, distant artifacts. But if we peel back time, what we see instead is the warmth of a human act. Each tablet, each seal, each manuscript page, these were not relics. They were tools. They served a purpose. A scribe wrote because someone needed to remember or someone needed to declare. Behind every undeciphered line, there was intent. The Indus Valley seals, for example, were likely touched by countless hands. Merchants, priests, rulers, people passing them across tables, pressing them into clay, carrying them from one city to another. The symbols carved on them were practical, meaningful in their moment. The fact that we cannot read them now does not mean they were vague or mysterious to their makers. On the contrary, they were clear. They were as obvious to the scribe as the word bread or home is to us. Think of Rongorongo's flowing glyphs. The people of Easter Island once knew their shapes as naturally as we know the letters of our alphabet. Children may have sung them in chants. Elders may have taught them under starlight. The scribe carving the wooden tablet was not creating a riddle. They were recording what everyone around them already understood. The breath of the scribe was aligned with the breath of the community. Even the Voynich manuscript, so strange, so alien to us, was likely written with fluency. To us, it looks like gibberish. To the hand that moved across the page, it was smooth, it was natural, it was language in flow. The writer did not stumble over their words. They did not hesitate. Their hand was confident, their rhythm steady, their intent unwavering. This is what we often forget when we stare at undeciphered scripts. They were not meant to be undeciphered. They were once alive. Their silence is only ours. For their creators, they spoke as clearly as our own words do today. There is something almost heartbreaking about this. To know that the breath of the ancient scribe, once so sure, is now gone. To know that what was ordinary for them has become extraordinary for us. What was once simple communication has transformed into one of humanity's deepest mysteries. And yet, there is also beauty here, because in every undeciphered word we feel that breath still. We feel the presence of the hand, the weight of the tool, the moment of creation. Time has buried the meaning, but not the act. The act survives in the shapes we see today. Perhaps that is why these languages draw us in so deeply. They are not just symbols, they are evidence of another mind, reaching out across time, reminding us that they were here, that they lived, that they tried to speak. And in some quiet, uncanny way, we are still listening. Imagine standing before an undeciphered script, a tablet or a page, its marks etched carefully, its lines perfectly preserved. Your eyes trace the shapes, but what your ears long for is missing, the sound. Every symbol once held a vibration, a breath, a rhythm on the tongue. But today, all we have is silence. Language begins not with writing, but with sound. The first human words were not scratched on stone. They were sung into the air, carried by wind, resonating through caves, whispered into another's ear. Sound is fleeting, it vanishes as soon as it is born. But when civilizations tried to preserve thought, they turned sound into symbol. A word became a sign, a sentence became a series of shapes, and for the first time, voices could outlast bodies. Yet here lies the tragedy of undeciphered languages. The symbol survives, but the sound is gone. The breath of the speaker has vanished. The syllables that once gave these marks their life are no longer in the world. We see the skeleton of words, but not their flesh. We see the shadow, but not the light. Think of the Indus script, those small marks on seals and tablets. Were they letters, each tied to a sound? Or were they whole words compressed into compact signs? Did they have vowels? Did they carry tones, like the rise and fall in Chinese or the delicate accents of Greek? We do not know. What we have are silent pictures that once sang, or take Rongorongo of Easter Island. The glyphs curve like bodies in motion, almost as if they are dancing across the wood. Perhaps they were chanted aloud as they were read, the rhythm of the voice matching the rhythm of the carving. But no chant remains. The last voices that knew how to sing these symbols into meaning have long since gone quiet. The script is now a score with no musicians left to play it. And then there is the Voynich manuscript. We see the looping, flowing letters arranged with precision, filling page after page. They were written quickly, almost effortlessly, as though the writer knew them as we know our alphabet. But what sounds accompanied them? Was it a language spoken by many or by one? Was it meant to be read aloud at all, or was it a silent code meant only for the eyes? This is the haunting truth of undeciphered scripts. They are not just silent because we cannot read them. They are silent because their sounds have disappeared from the human voice. We may reconstruct meaning someday, but the living sound, the way the word felt on the tongue, the way it resonated in the chest, the way it was sung, whispered, or shouted, that is gone forever. And yet in that silence, there is also an echo. When we look at the marks, our minds begin to imagine. We create phantom sounds, tentative guesses. A curl might remind us of a car. A sharp line might feel like a T. A loop might seem like a vowel drifting in air. Our imagination begins to breathe for the silence, giving life where none remains. Perhaps this is why we find these languages so compelling. They are not just puzzles to solve, they are reminders of fragility. Voices can vanish, whole civilizations can fall quiet, yet their echoes linger, captured in shapes that still call out to us. The echo of lost sounds is both absence and presence. It is the awareness that something is gone, and the strange sensation that, if we listen closely enough, it might return. Maybe, deep in our subconscious, we still carry traces of those voices, ancient rhythms buried in the shared memory of humanity. When you look at those undeciphered marks, pause, close your eyes. Imagine them not as symbols, but as voices rising in the dark. Imagine a market where they were spoken, a ritual where they were chanted, a classroom where they were taught. Imagine their sounds floating once more in the air, for in doing so, you let the silence breathe again. What is meaning, really? It feels so solid when we speak it, when we write it, when we hear it. But in truth, meaning is fragile, more fragile than stone, more fragile than paper, more fragile even than memory itself. A civilization can raise walls, build monuments, carve symbols into rock. Yet, if no one remembers how to read those symbols, the meaning dissolves into mist. Imagine a sentence, simple, ordinary. Perhaps in your language you say, "The sun sets beyond the river." Those words carry an image, a moment, a truth. Now imagine writing that sentence in a script that only your community knows. Everyone around you reads it easily. Children learn it in school. Merchants use it in trade. Priests chant it in ceremonies. For you, meaning is secure, but time is merciless. Centuries pass. Your city crumbles. Your people scatter. Your language dies on the tongue of the last speaker. The marks remain, carved into stone, pressed into clay, but without the voice to unlock them, they become strange, alien, meaningless. What once was obvious becomes unfathomable. A sentence that once evoked the glow of sunset now stares back as a riddle. This is the fragility of meaning. It lives only as long as there is continuity of understanding. Break the chain and the meaning vanishes, even if the symbols survive perfectly intact. The Indus Valley seals are a perfect example. Their carvings are sharp, their lines preserved, yet meaning has slipped away. They are fragments of thought without a key. Were they marking ownership, recording prayers, identifying rulers? We don't know. And the longer the silence stretches, the more possibilities unfold, until meaning itself becomes infinite, a shadow with no edge. Rongorongo offers the same tragedy. The islanders once knew its flow, but when missionaries arrived, when oral traditions broke, when suppression erased memory, the chain of meaning snapped. Today, scholars look at those curved glyphs, desperate to reattach sound to symbol, but the link is lost. The symbols are there, beautiful, clear, repetitive, but their soul, the meaning that once bound them, has slipped through time's fingers. The Voynich manuscript amplifies this fragility. Its script is long, detailed, structured, yet completely opaque. Some argue it was always meaningless, an elaborate hoax, but others sense depth, consistency, grammar hidden within the pages. If meaning is there, it is fragile, waiting to be broken open. And if meaning is not there, then the book is the ultimate ghost, an illusion of meaning, forever luring us deeper. This is what unsettles us most, the realization that meaning is not eternal. We like to believe words are permanent, that language is a fortress against forgetting. But the truth is harsher. Language is only as strong as its speakers. Once silence falls, meaning collapses. And yet, there is another layer to this fragility, for in its fragility lies beauty. The undeciphered word is a reminder that nothing is guaranteed. It teaches humility. It teaches us that even our own words, spoken today, could one day become noise to a distant future. The thought is sobering, but it is also strangely freeing, because perhaps meaning does not need eternity. Perhaps it only needs the present. The scribe carved not for us, but for their own people, their own time. In that moment, their words carried weight. Their community understood. Their language was alive. And that was enough. The fragility of meaning is the fragility of us all. We too are temporary. our voices too will fade. But maybe that is what makes every word precious, the knowledge that it might not last forever. So when we look at undeciphered languages, maybe we are not just mourning their silence. Maybe we are also learning from them, learning to treasure the fleeting gift of meaning while it still breathes on our tongues. Imagine kneeling in the dirt of a forgotten city, the sun baking down, the air heavy with the scent of earth freshly broken. Your hands are covered in dust, your tools lie scattered beside you, and in the silence of your excavation, you feel it, the hard edge of something not born of nature, a fragment, half buried, waiting. You brush carefully, slowly, reverently, until the surface reveals itself. Lines, carvings, symbols. For the archaeologist, this moment is electric. The first touch of an artifact is not just the discovery of an object, it is the reawakening of a voice, a tablet pressed into clay by someone's hand 4,000 years ago, a seal carried through bustling markets by a merchant whose name we'll never know, a wooden tablet passed down as sacred knowledge, once sung beneath starlight. All of it rests quietly in the soil until at last it touches human skin again. And yet this first touch is not without weight, because as soon as the archaeologist recognizes a symbol, a script, a mark of language, the weight of responsibility descends. To hold such an object is to hold a bridge between worlds. But if the script is undeciphered, the bridge is broken, and the archaeologist feels both awe and sorrow. Awe at being in contact with an ancient mind. Sorrow at realizing that mind is silent, unreachable. Think of Sir John Marshall, who oversaw the excavations of the Indus Valley sites in the early 20th century. His teams unearthed thousands of seals, each marked with strange symbols. Imagine the thrill of that moment, seeing an entire writing system emerge from the soil, realizing it represented a civilization that rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia in scale and sophistication. But alongside the thrill came the torment. The symbols resisted understanding. They whispered meaning, but refused to speak it. On Easter Island, the first European missionaries who encountered Rongorongo tablets felt a similar jolt. Here were neat rows of glyphs, intricate and orderly, proving the islanders had developed something profound, writing, or something very close to it. But when asked, the islanders could no longer read it. Colonization and suppression had broken the chain of knowledge. The missionaries held voices in their hands, yet they could not hear them. The Voynich manuscript, too, carries this feeling. Discovered in the early 20th century, it was like opening a treasure chest only to find a riddle. Beautiful illustrations of plants, stars, and strange women fill its pages. The script dances across the parchment with purpose, with rhythm, yet it is mute. Every person who touches it feels the same thing. The burning desire to know what lies inside, paired with the aching knowledge that the answer may never come. The archaeologist's first touch is sacred because it is the closest thing we have to resurrection. Civilizations may fall, voices may vanish, but in the soil they leave behind fragments of themselves, waiting for us to find them. The moment of discovery is like catching a ghost mid-breath, but when the script cannot be read, the ghost remains just out of reach, seen but not heard. And so the archaeologist lives in paradox, holding the most intimate evidence of human thought, yet unable to enter it. They feel the weight of time pressing down on their fingertips. They feel the echo of a hand reaching out from centuries past, but they cannot clasp it fully. Still, they persist. They clean the fragments. They catalogue them. They preserve them. For though the words cannot yet be read, the archaeologist knows this. Discovery is the first step toward rebirth. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but one day, someday, the silence may break. Until then, the archaeologist's first touch is a reminder. The voices of the past are not gone. They are waiting, and sometimes even in silence, waiting is its own kind of speech. Imagine holding in your hands a piece of clay, no bigger than a plate, yet carrying within it a silence that has lasted for over 3,000 years. This is the Phaistos disc, discovered in 1908 on the island of Crete, in the ruins of the Minoan palace at Phaistos. Pressed into its surface are symbols, arranged in a spiral, like a coiled path leading inward, as though the message it carries is not meant to move outward into the world, but inward, toward the soul of whoever dares to read it. Each symbol is crisp, almost modern in design, as if it were stamped yesterday instead of in an age long lost to dust. We see human figures, plants, tools, shields, animals, simple, clear shapes. But together, they whisper a story too complex for us to unravel. No Rosetta Stone has yet stepped forth to help us unlock its voice. No bilingual inscription to guide us. Instead, we are left staring at a riddle pressed into clay, a labyrinth for the mind. Some believe it is a hymn, words spiraling inward like a prayer, meant to ascend toward the gods. Others think it is a record of warriors, a litany of battles long forgotten, names and places immortalized by symbols. Still others imagine it as a game, a riddle of the ancient world, crafted for play rather than permanence. Yet the beauty lies not in the answer, but in the persistence of the question. When you look at it, you can almost feel the hand of the unknown artisan pressing those marks, each stamp deliberate, as if he knew his work would outlast him, though perhaps he never dreamed it would outlast his entire civilization. The Minoans themselves vanished, their language, Linear A, still unread, and with it, perhaps the very key to understanding this disc. Think about that. We hold the words of a people whose voices cannot reach us. It is like finding a letter in a bottle, but the alphabet is alien, the ink eternal, and the sea of time refuses to give up its secret. What does it mean when we stand before the Phaistos disc? It means we are staring into a mirror made of clay, and what looks back is our own hunger to understand. We see ourselves in the mystery because deep down we too are afraid that someday our words might also become undecipherable to future generations. Someday, our books, our recordings, even our digital whispers may become as strange to others as the Phaistos disc is to us. And so, the disc does not just speak of the Minoans, it speaks of us, our fragility, our longing, our endless attempt to preserve meaning in the face of eternity. Beneath the dust of time, in the ancient lands that today stretch across Pakistan and northwest India, once thrived a civilization as vast and complex as those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Indus Valley civilization, also called Harappan civilization, blossomed along the banks of the Indus River more than 4,000 years ago. It was a world of brick cities, intricate drainage systems, granaries, marketplaces, and streets laid out with mathematical precision. And yet, for all its sophistication, what remains most haunting about the Indus people is not the grandeur of their architecture, but the silence of their language. For over a century, scholars have studied the small rectangular seals unearthed from Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and other sites. Each seal bears tiny inscriptions, scratches of strange signs, carved alongside depictions of animals, unicorn-like creatures, elephants, bulls, tigers, and fantastic hybrids. At first glance, these seals look simple, like someone had pressed into stone the shorthand of their day. But behind those brief markings lies a mystery that has defied every attempt at decoding. Unlike the Rosetta Stone that gave us a key to Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Indus Valley has yielded no bilingual text, no bridge between the unknown and the known. The seals bear inscriptions usually no longer than 5 or 6 symbols, sometimes as few as 2. They are brief whispers, fragments of sentences, if they are sentences at all. And yet, in their brevity lies a riddle so deep that it continues to baffle linguists, archaeologists, and computer scientists alike. What were these inscriptions? Were they names perhaps identifying merchants, families, or officials? Were they records of goods transactions written in a proto-ledger? Or were they sacred words, prayers carved into stone, offerings meant for gods instead of people? Some even argue they may not be a language at all, but symbols of clan identity or ritual marks, never meant to be spoken in full sentences. The weight of this question presses down like the heat of an Indus summer. Because if the Indus script is a language, then it holds the thoughts of millions, traders, rulers, mothers, builders, captured in miniature form. If it is not, then what we are staring at is a civilization whose voice was never meant to reach us, whose legacy was carried in action, in architecture, in living memory, rather than in the permanence of written words. Now imagine walking through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro. The city, though silent, seems alive with the ghosts of its former inhabitants. You tread along broad avenues paved with baked bricks, where merchants once displayed beads, pottery, and ornaments in open-air markets. You pass by a public bath, where clear water once reflected firelight in the evenings, its walls echoing with laughter and ritual. And then, you find a tiny carved seal lying in the dust, an object small enough to hold between 2 fingers. yet heavy with mystery. You turn it over, and there, engraved with precision, are those elusive symbols. Perhaps the symbols tell you the name of the merchant who owned it, or perhaps they tell you what goods he sold: cotton, grain, spices, or maybe they are prayers, an invocation to the god represented by the animal beside them. The unicorn-like creature, which appears on countless seals, may have been a sacred emblem, an emblem of divine guardianship. But you do not know, and the seal does not tell you. It only stares back, daring you to solve its puzzle. Generations of scholars have tried. Some have claimed it represents an early form of Dravidian languages spoken in southern India today. Others argue it is related to Sanskrit, or to Mesopotamian cuneiform, or perhaps to something else entirely, something we have not yet imagined. Computer models have been trained to analyze the patterns of symbols, suggesting they bear statistical resemblance to known human languages. Yet without longer texts, without context, we cannot tell whether those patterns truly carry words and grammar, or whether they are only the illusion of meaning. And so, the Indus script sits in a liminal space, half language, half symbol, half known, half forgotten. A civilization that was advanced enough to plan vast cities, control rivers with dams, trade with Mesopotamia across the Arabian Sea, and yet left behind no decipherable text, no stories, no myths, no songs. Only these tiny inscriptions, only whispers on stone. There is something haunting in this silence, because in Egypt we have the grand stories of gods, of Osiris and Isis, of pharaohs and their tombs. In Mesopotamia, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, tales of kings who sought immortality. In Greece, we have Homer, but for the Indus Valley, the third great cradle of human civilization, we have nothing. No myth, no epic, no poem, only undeciphered symbols, like seeds locked in stone, waiting for rain that may never come. And yet, maybe that is precisely what makes the Indus so powerful to us today. Their silence allows us to dream. It allows us to imagine what those people thought, believed, feared, and loved. The seals become mirrors into our imagination, forcing us to see not their words, but our own longing for connection. We project onto them our own desire to be remembered, our own terror of being forgotten. What if, in some distant future, archaeologists unearthed fragments of our civilization, but could not read our languages? What if they found USB drives, books, or websites, but lacked the tools to decipher them? Would they stand before our words, as we stand before the Indus script, staring into silence, longing to hear voices that will never speak again? The Indus Valley teaches us this. Civilizations rise, build, flourish, and fade. Their voices may vanish, but their presence lingers in stone, in soil, in the silent carvings of a seal. The echoes remain, even if the words do not. And perhaps that is enough. So when you think of the Indus script, think of it not just as a puzzle waiting to be solved, but as a mirror of time itself, a whisper across millennia not meant to be fully understood, but meant to remind us of the fragility of meaning and the resilience of silence. The Indus Valley, in its quiet, speaks louder than we imagine. Far out in the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean lies a speck of land so remote, so isolated, that it feels less like part of Earth and more like a dream floating upon the water. Easter Island, Rapa Nui as its people call it, is known to the world for its colossal stone guardians, the moai, silent faces carved from volcanic rock, standing sentinel along the island's windswept shores, staring inland with eyes that seem to pierce across centuries. But what few outside the circle of scholars know is that the moai are not the only enigma of this island. Hidden in the wood, in fragile glyphs carved by hand, there exists another mystery, Rongorongo, a script as haunting as the silence of the statues themselves. Rongorongo was first discovered in the 19th century, after missionaries arrived on the island. They noticed that the people of Rapa Nui treated certain wooden tablets with reverence, as if they carried sacred knowledge. The tablets were carved with rows of strange, curling glyphs, shapes resembling men, birds, fish, tools, plants, and abstract forms. Each glyph is graceful, flowing, almost like the strokes of a painter rather than the rigid lines of an alphabet. But what they mean, no one knows. What makes Rongorongo so alluring is not just the glyphs themselves, but the context in which they were born. Easter Island is one of the most isolated places on Earth, thousands of miles from the nearest continent. How then did such a sophisticated script arise here, cut off from the great civilizations of writing? Did the people of Rapa Nui invent it entirely on their own? A rare moment in human history where writing blooms spontaneously? Or did the faintest whispers of influence drift across the Pacific, carried by sailors and traders, planting seeds of literacy that grew in this unlikely soil? The tragedy is that whatever secrets Rongorongo once held, they have been largely lost. When missionaries arrived, they saw the tablets not as treasures of culture, but as relics of paganism. Many were burned. The oral traditions that might have explained the glyphs were silenced. Diseases brought from outside devastated the population, and with them went the last of the scribes, the last of those who knew the chants that may have breathed life into these symbols. Today, only about 24 tablets survive, scattered in museums and private collections. They sit behind glass, fragile wood etched with mystery, their voices muted, their song unfinished. Imagine one of those tablets resting in your hands. The wood is worn, smooth with age, darkened by time. You tilt it under the light and see rows upon rows of glyphs, carved in a unique pattern, reverse boustrophodon. This means that one line runs left to right, and the next line below it runs right to left, like the path of an ox ploughing a field. And not only do the lines switch direction, but the glyphs themselves are rotated upside down depending on the line, a dizzying, intentional dance of symbols. To read Rongorongo would not simply be to follow letters across a page, it would be to walk a labyrinth. But here lies the true question. What was written on these tablets? Were they genealogies, tracing the lineages of chiefs back through centuries? Were they hymns, prayers to the gods who watched over the Moai? Were they records of rituals, of planting and harvest, of astronomy, of the rising and setting of the stars? Some scholars suggest that the glyphs encode chants, meant to be memorized and recited aloud. Others believe they may describe calendars, astronomical alignments, or sacred myths. And yet, without a bilingual key, without a Rosetta Stone for the Pacific, we cannot say for certain. Think about the silence that hangs over this loss. The Moai stand mute, the tablets sit locked in glass, and the voices of Rapa Nui's ancestors are trapped inside wooden lines that no living tongue can read. We stand outside the script, peering in, like children pressing their faces against the window of a darkened room. But perhaps what makes Rongorongo so powerful is not just its indecipherability, but its humanity. Each glyph is alive, flowing with the curves of the human hand that carved it. Unlike the rigid blocks of Mesopotamian cuneiform or the angular strokes of Egyptian hieroglyphs, Rongorongo feels intimate, organic, as though the carver was not chiseling stone for eternity, but singing into wood for memory. You can almost sense the rhythm of a chant in the way the glyphs curl and lean. They feel less like letters and more like notes in a song. There is something almost heartbreaking in knowing that these notes now rest in silence. Picture, for a moment, the last scribe of Rapa Nui. The island has changed. The Moai no longer rise as they once did. The people suffer under famine, war, disease. The world they knew is fading, yet the scribe still sits with a wooden tablet, carving lines, pressing into the grain of the tree the symbols passed down through generations. Perhaps he knows he is the last. Perhaps he feels the weight of his culture resting on his hand. Each stroke is an act of defiance against oblivion. Each glyph is a promise that his people's voice will not vanish entirely. And yet it did vanish, at least to us. But maybe not entirely, because the tablets still exist. They survived fire, they survived suppression, they survived time itself. And though we cannot read them, they still hold within them the potential to speak again. Modern scholars use computers to analyze patterns, to compare glyphs, to test hypotheses. Some believe that one day we might recover enough oral tradition, enough fragments, to begin piecing together their meaning. Others argue it may never happen, that the key was lost when the last fluent chanter died. Yet even in silence, Rongorongo speaks. It speaks of a people who reach for the stars from the most isolated island on Earth. It speaks of the universal human impulse to carve meaning into matter, to leave behind a trace of thought, to ensure that voices echo beyond the span of a single lifetime. It speaks of memory, of loss, of resilience, and perhaps this is the deeper lesson. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to remind us that silence too is a kind of language. The Moai stare inland and the tablets sit mute, and together they form a chorus of stone and wood that whispers of human fragility. of cultures rising and falling like the tides. So the next time you hear of Easter Island, think beyond the statues. Think of the wooden tablets tucked in drawers of museums. They're glyphs waiting, like seeds asleep in darkness. Seeds that may never sprout again, but whose very existence reminds us that humanity has always sought to sing, even in the loneliest corners of the earth. Rongorongo may be undeciphered, but it is not voiceless. Its silence is a song we feel rather than hear, and maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Before the great pyramids of Teotihuacan rose, before the Maya carved their dynastic histories in stone, before the Aztecs gazed upon their empire of lakes and temples, there was another people, the Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. The Olmecs flourished more than 3,000 years ago, along the swampy lowlands of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. They carved colossal heads of stone, each face distinct, each gaze heavy with presence, as though watching both the earth and the heavens. They built ceremonial centers aligned with celestial movements. They worshipped gods half human, half beast, jaguar faces, infant deities, creatures of both earth and sky. And they wrote, or at least, they left us symbols. The Olmecs are a puzzle because unlike the Maya, they left no long texts carved into monuments, no codices to read, no epic inscriptions that reveal the lives of kings. Instead, what survives are fragments, mysterious symbols carved into stone monuments, inscribed on jade, painted on pottery, symbols that hint at language, yet slip through our grasp when we try to read them. The most famous of these fragments is the Cascajal block, discovered in Veracruz in the early 2000s, a slab of serpentine, smoothed flat, bearing 62 carved signs arranged in rows. Some of the symbols are geometric, crosses, ovals, grids. Others look like plants, fish, insects, tools. They repeat in patterns like words. They are not random marks, not mere decoration. They feel deliberate, systematic, like the breath of writing itself. If the Cascajal block is truly writing, then it may be the earliest known script in the Americas, predating even the Maya hieroglyphs by centuries. Think about that. The very first attempt to bind spoken thought into eternal signs may have begun here, in the humid jungles of the Olmec world, yet we cannot read it. Without a key, without longer texts, without continuity into later scripts, the meaning remains hidden. The Olmec language itself has vanished, replaced by tongues of later peoples. What was once spoken in marketplaces, whispered in rituals, shouted across ball courts, is gone. And with it, perhaps, the key to these silent marks. But what do we see when we look at them? Imagine standing at an Olmec ceremonial center, like La Venta. The air is thick with humidity, the smell of earth and water rising from the swamps. Ahead of you stands a massive stone altar, carved with the image of a ruler emerging from the mouth of a cave, a portal between worlds. On his chest, on the stone around him, are glyph-like marks, tiny compared to his figure, yet powerful in their mystery. What do they say? The name of the ruler? A record of his deeds? A prayer to the gods of rain and maize? Or a warning to those who approach? The Olmecs lived in a world alive with sacred power. Jaguars were not just animals. They were symbols of might, of transformation, of the liminal space between human and divine. Infants were carved with fierce, almost supernatural faces, embodying gods of rain and fertility. The very earth was sacred, caves and mountains seen as portals to the spirit world. Surely then, their symbols must have carried layers of meaning, political, religious, cosmic. To read the Olmec glyphs would be to unlock the mind of one of humanity's earliest great civilizations of the Americas. It would be to hear their myths in their own voice, to know the names of their gods not second-hand, but first-hand, carved by their own hands. But for now, those myths remain in silence, shadows on stone. Scholars debate, is the Cascajal block truly writing, or is it proto-writing, a step toward language but not quite there? Some argue it may represent ritual symbols used to mark offerings or ceremonies. Others believe it encodes speech, full words arranged in syntax. The signs repeat in ways that suggest grammar, yet we cannot prove it. We are left, as always, with fragments, with maybes, with echoes. And this is where the poetry of the Olmecs meets the tragedy of their silence. Because for every colossal head that survives, for every altar unearthed, for every block of jade carved, there may have been countless others lost, Wood decays, cloth disappears, paint fades. What we hold today are only the shadows of a vast culture that once thrived with color and sound. Imagine what has been lost. The manuscripts written on bark, the carvings on wood, the chants that carried meaning in the open air. The jungle keeps its secrets well, but perhaps the Olmecs never intended their script to be easily read. Perhaps it was sacred, reserved for priests, shamans, rulers. Perhaps it was not a language of the people, but a language of the gods, understood only within ritual, only within trance. To look at it now, stripped from its context, is like staring at a lock without the key, a song without its rhythm. And yet, there is beauty in this silence. The Olmecs remind us that civilization does not require permanence to have meaning. Their voices may be gone, but their faces remain, carved into stone heads taller than men. Their symbols may be unread, but they continue to draw us closer, to make us wonder, to ignite in us the fire of curiosity. And perhaps that is their gift to us, not words, but questions. Questions that stretch across time, reminding us that all language is fragile, all meaning temporary. Even our words inscribed in books or glowing on screens may someday become indecipherable to future generations. Someday, someone may hold a fragment of our writing and wonder what it meant, just as we wonder about the Olmecs. Think of that. Think of how fragile memory is, how fragile meaning is, and then look again at the Olmec glyphs. They are not failures of communication. They are echoes of humanity itself, reaching through the silence of millennia to remind us of the impermanence of all voices. The Olmecs whisper still, even if we cannot understand. Their jaguars still roar, their altars still stand, their block of serpentine still carries its rows of carved signs. And in their silence, they are more alive than we imagine. Because silence is not emptiness. It is an invitation to listen closer, to lean in, to wonder, to dream. And so, when you hear of the Olmecs, do not think only of their colossal heads, staring stoically through time. Think of the Cascajal block. Think of the small, deliberate scratches on stone. Think of the jaguar gods, the rain deities, the rulers emerging from caves. And think of the script that has never yet spoken to us, yet still holds the potential to change how we see the story of humanity. The Olmecs may be gone, but their symbols remain. And in those symbols lies the silent song of beginnings, the first words of the Americas, still waiting to be heard. Across the blue expanse of the Mediterranean, on the island of Crete, the sea breeze carries with it the memory of a people whose world was both luminous and mysterious. The Minoans. They were a civilization of color and motion, of frescoes that showed dancers, athletes, and dolphins leaping in waves of brilliant blue. They were architects of sprawling palaces like Knossos, where winding corridors and storerooms filled with amphorae whispered of a society both wealthy and organized. Their artisans shaped jewelry of gold and ivory. Their ships carved paths across the Aegean, their myths later blossoming into the stories of labyrinths and minotaurs. And yet, for all their brilliance, their voices remain hushed. For what they wrote, the script called Linear A, has never been deciphered. Linear A appears carved into tablets of clay, etched into pottery, painted on jars, sometimes pressed with seal stones. Its symbols are delicate, angular, and systematic, arranged in rows that clearly bear the rhythm of language. There are over 700 inscriptions discovered, and the script itself consists of about 90 signs, enough to suggest syllables, perhaps words, maybe sentences. Scholars know its cousin, Linear B, which was later adapted by the Mycenaeans to record an early form of Greek. Linear B was deciphered in the 1950s, and with it came records of rations, trade, offerings to gods, and the mundane details of palace life. But Linear A, its elder sibling, remains locked. Why? Because although the signs of Linear A resemble those of Linear B, they do not correspond to the same language. When scholars tried to read Linear A using the phonetic values of Linear B, the words that emerged were gibberish. No Greek, no known tongue. What this means is that the Minoans, who flourished centuries before the Mycenaeans, spoke a language entirely their own, unrelated to Greek, perhaps unrelated to anything we know today, and so the tablets sit in silence. They contain lists, records, symbols arranged with intention, yet their meaning remains veiled. Were they accounting for grain, oil, livestock? Were they noting offerings to gods, sacrifices in temples, the movements of traders and ships? Or did some tablets hold stories, prayers, songs, memories that could have given us a glimpse into the Minoan soul? Imagine wandering the palace at Knossos. The corridors twist and turn like a labyrinth, the walls painted with bull leapers flying over the backs of massive animals, their bodies arched in grace. Light spills in through open courtyards, carrying the scent of the sea. You pass storerooms lined with pithoi, giant jars that once held oil, wine, grain. And then, in a quiet chamber, you see a clay tablet lying on a shelf. Its surface is etched with linear A, the marks pressed by a scribe's stylus thousands of years ago. The marks are neat, deliberate, arranged in lines that suggest order. But when you try to read, the meaning vanishes. It is like hearing a voice on the other side of a wall, clear in tone, but muffled beyond understanding. This silence gnaws at historians, because the Minoans were not a small tribe on the edge of the world. They were one of the first great civilizations of Europe, flourishing around 2000 BCE, their influence stretching across the Aegean and beyond. To not know their language is to not know their heart. We see their art, but not their poetry. We walk their palaces, but cannot hear their conversations. We know of their myths only through the Greeks who came later, who reshaped them into stories of labyrinths, bulls, and gods. But what were the Minoans' own stories? What did they call their gods, their heroes, their land? The script itself teases us with glimpses. Certain words repeat, as though they may be titles or commodities or deities. Some scholars think they can identify signs for numbers, weights, and measures. Others believe they recognize recurring suffixes, suggesting grammar. But without knowing the underlying language, these are fragments of a puzzle without an image to guide us. And so, we imagine, perhaps Linear A records the names of Minoan queens, priestesses, or merchants who ruled the flow of trade. Perhaps it describes rituals at the peak sanctuaries of Crete, where worshippers climbed mountains to offer libations to the gods of sky and earth. Perhaps it tells of festivals where music and dance filled the courtyards, where the rhythm of drums echoed across the island like a heartbeat. Or perhaps it says nothing so grand. Perhaps it is simply the tally of grain and oil, written to keep the palace fed and the ships supplied. But even that, mundane though it may seem, would give us intimacy, a closeness with the daily lives of the Minoans. It would give us their voice, however practical, however ordinary. The tragedy is that Linear A never transitioned into a long tradition. The eruption of the volcano on Thera, earthquakes and invasions destabilized the Minoan world. Their palaces fell. Their language vanished. The Mycenaeans rose in their place, taking over the palaces and adapting the script into Linear B. With that shift, the Minoan tongue was silenced, its words drowned beneath the waves of history. And yet, the tablets remain. Think of them as seeds lying dormant. Each tablet, each inscription, is a capsule of meaning waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. Perhaps one day, a bilingual text will emerge, some forgotten artifact hidden in a cave or buried in the soil of Crete. Perhaps one day the Minoans will speak again. Until then, Linear A is both a silence and a promise, a reminder that language can endure even when its voice is gone, and a reminder that mystery is as much a part of civilization as clarity. The story of Linear A is also the story of us, because what is language, if not our attempt to fight against silence? Every word we write, every inscription we carve, is an act of resistance against forgetting. The Minoans carved their words into clay, not knowing that millennia later we would hold those tablets and long to hear them. In their silence we see ourselves. One day, our own words may be unreadable. One day, our books, our screens, our recordings may become as indecipherable as the marks of Linear A. And yet, like the Minoans, we keep writing. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson. The meaning may fade, the words may vanish, but the act of writing itself, the impulse to leave behind a trace, is eternal. The Minoans remind us that civilization is not only about what survives, but also about what is lost, and how we listen to those losses. So when you think of Linear A, do not think only of a code waiting to be cracked. Think of it as a voice from the labyrinth, echoing softly, calling us not just to solve, but to listen. Think of it as a reminder that some mysteries are not failures of understanding, but invitations to wonder. The Minoans may never speak to us directly, but through their silence, through their undeciphered marks, they tell us something timeless, that all civilizations are fragile, that all voices are mortal, and that meaning itself is always at risk of being forgotten. And in that silence, there is beauty. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, lies in the heart of the Pacific, a lonely fragment of volcanic stone adrift in a vast ocean. When most people hear of it, they think of the Moai, the great stone heads staring out over the horizon, their backs turned to the sea as if guarding secrets that must never be spoken. But the statues are not the only enigma born from this place. There is something quieter, more fragile, yet equally profound. It is called Rongorongo, a script carved into wooden tablets, a language that hums with silence, a system of signs that may once have been the heartbeat of an entire people. The first Europeans to arrive on Easter Island in 1722 reported nothing about writing. They saw the statues, they saw the isolation, but they did not mention tablets inscribed with symbols. It was not until the 19th century that Rongorongo was recorded, just as the island society was collapsing under the weight of colonization, slavery, and disease. Imagine the tragedy, a culture struggling to hold on to itself while its last breaths of memory slipped away. And within that struggle lay these tablets, carved with rows of symbols flowing in a strange, alternating direction, like a mirror dance across wood. The signs themselves are haunting. They resemble tiny figures, humans, birds, fish, plants, crescents of the moon, geometric marks. Each line is inscribed with a sharp precision, as though the carver wanted to ensure the message would endure. And yet we cannot read them. The chants that once gave them life have long fallen silent. Some scholars believe Rongorongo may have been a mnemonic system, a way to guide oral recitation, chants, genealogies, myths, etched in wood to keep memory alive. Others argue it was a fully developed script, one of the very few instances in human history where writing may have been invented independently. If true, it would mean the people of Rapa Nui, isolated in their ocean cradle, looked at the world around them and felt the same restless urge as the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the urge to trap sound in symbol, to anchor memory in matter, and yet there is the silence. When missionaries came, they forbade the use of the old script. Many of the tablets were burned, repurposed as firewood, erased not by time but by human choice. What remains today is only a handful of weathered wooden planks scattered across museums, mute survivors of a cultural erasure. Their voices were stolen before we even knew they existed. Close your eyes and picture it. An elder of Rapa Nui sitting by firelight, a carved tablet resting on his lap, his fingers tracing the symbols as he chants the lineage of his people, the great voyages of their ancestors, the rituals of the gods. His children sit in silence, listening, memorizing, learning the script not as mere writing but as rhythm and song. Then, centuries later, those songs vanish, leaving only the marks behind. What was once alive, fluid, breathing, is now a fossil etched in wood. Rongorongo challenges us not only with its mystery, but with its fragility. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the stone-carved inscriptions of Mesopotamia, it is not monumental. It is intimate, small, delicate, wood against the ocean's salt and wind. It reminds us that not all civilizations leave behind grand ruins. Some leave whispers, vulnerable to the slightest gust of forgetting. And yet, perhaps that is what makes it powerful. These tablets tell us that humanity's deepest treasures are not always carved in stone. They can be carved in memory, in song, in fleeting lines etched by hands that believed in the endurance of story. There are whispers, too, that Rongorongo might have held astronomical knowledge, calendars, cycles of the stars. Some symbols repeat in ways that suggest lunar counting, celestial observation. If this is true, then these songs of wood may have been more than myths. They may have been maps of time itself, guiding when to plant, when to sail, when to honor the sky. And still, we cannot read them. Every attempt has failed. The code remains locked. But perhaps in that silence, Rongorongo still speaks, not in words, but in what it represents, the determination of a people to remember, to resist the forgetting tide, to speak even across centuries of silence. The Moai stare outward at the horizon, guardians of mystery. Rongorongo stares inward, into us, demanding we confront the fragility of culture, the ease with which voices can be silenced, the responsibility we have to listen carefully to what remains. The silent songs of Easter Island are still playing. The question is, Are we listening? High in the thin air of the Andes, where mountains pierce the clouds and valleys hum with rivers older than empires, a civilization once thrived that did not write in ink or carve in stone. Instead, they wove their language into strands of fiber, spun from llama and alpaca wool, dyed in vivid colors, twisted and knotted into intricate forms. This was the language of the quipu, a system of chords and knots used by the Inca and their predecessors, an undeciphered script of touch rather than sight, a memory woven into thread. Imagine standing in a dimly lit chamber of an Incan administrative house. A quipucamayok, the keeper of knots, unrolls a bundle of cords. Each cord hangs like a strand of hair from a central rope. Some are red, others blue, green, yellow, or brown, their dyes carrying meanings that no one alive today can confidently assign. The cords are not smooth. They are tied with knots of different types: simple overhand knots, long knots, figure 8 knots, single loops, clusters. To us, they seem random, the accidental tangles of a careless hand. But to the trained eyes of the quipucamayok, these chords sang like lines of poetry. Numbers, names, histories, tributes, perhaps even laws, all recorded in the intimate geometry of fiber. What made the quipu so extraordinary is that it was not simply a mnemonic device, not merely an abacus made of strings. It was something more, something closer to writing, but rooted in a different sense. Not the visual, but the tactile. For the Inca, language could live in the hand, in the texture of cords sliding through the fingers, in the feel of knots placed with precision. To read a quipu, you did not simply look. You touched, you felt, you remembered. We know some things. Spanish chroniclers recorded that quipus were used to track census data, tributes, agricultural production. Knots arranged in base 10 systems could represent quantities, hundreds, tens, ones, allowing the empire to count its people, its goods, its resources. In this way, the quipu was a tool of administration, the backbone of a civilization that stretched across nearly the entire western spine of South America. Imagine the logistics of such a vast empire: roads winding over mountains, storehouses brimming with maize and potatoes, armies moving across jagged terrain. All of it organized through cords and knots. But we also sense there was more. Some quipus do not conform to simple numerical systems. They carry patterns too complex, too irregular to be reduced to accounting. They seem to pulse with something else, something closer to story, to narrative. Some scholars suggest that quipus might have encoded myths, genealogies, even songs. Perhaps entire histories were carried in those chords, read aloud by keepers whose knowledge vanished when the empire fell to the Spanish. The chroniclers tell us that quipus could record things past and things to come. They speak of oral recitations guided by knots, of chants tied into fiber. If this is true, then the quipu was not just a calculator, it was a library, a woven archive of an empire. Now imagine the silence that followed. When the Spanish arrived, they brought their own system of writing: parchment, ink, alphabets. To them, the quipu was foreign, threatening. A script that could not be read was a script that could conceal rebellion, heresy, memory. Many quipus were burned, dismissed as useless string, erased before their voices could be heard. The keepers of knots, who once carried the empire's memory in their hands, were silenced. Yet some quipus survived, scattered in museums and collections. They hang in glass cases, cords faded, knots stiff with age. When we stand before them, we face not only their silence but also our own blindness. We have forgotten how to feel language in thread. We live in the world of paper and screens, of letters and pixels, and so the quipu stares at us as if from another universe. And yet, the quipu still resists forgetting. In recent years, researchers have begun to notice patterns. Computer analysis has revealed consistencies in knot placement, in color choices, in chord arrangements. It may be that some quipus hold phonetic elements, that sounds themselves were knotted into string. If so, then we are standing at the edge of rediscovery, on the verge of learning to hear the Inca speak again. Not with stone, not with ink, but with fiber. What does it mean that a civilization's words were chords, that their history was knots? It means that language is not bound to a single form. It can live in clay, in wood, in song, in gesture, in touch. The quipu teaches us that communication is not just about what is seen, but also about what is felt. It reminds us that memory can be woven, that story can be tied, that meaning can exist outside the alphabet. Close your eyes and imagine running your fingers along a quipu. Feel the knot, a cluster tied just so, rough against your fingertip, a tiny mountain of fiber. To you, it is nothing but a knot. To the quipu kamayok, it is a number, a date, a name, a life. Each knot is a bead of memory, and together they form a necklace of civilization. To lose the ability to read it is to lose not just words, but an entire way of being human. And so the quipu waits. It hangs in silence, yes, but its knots are not empty. They are still tied to the pulse of the Andes, to the hands that made them, to the mountains that watched. One day, perhaps, we will read them again, not just with our eyes, but with the patience of our hands, the rhythm of our memory, the humility to see that language can take shapes we have forgotten how to imagine. Until then, the quipu remains both a mystery and a mirror. It whispers to us that every civilization believes its words will endure, but the truth is harsher. Words survive only if others remember how to read them. The hills of Tuscany are draped with vineyards, olive groves, and villages whose stones whisper stories that run far deeper than the memory of Rome. Beneath those hills, in tombs carved into rock and sanctuaries long abandoned, there lies a civilization that lived, flourished, and then was absorbed into the empire that would later dominate the world. These were the Etruscans, a people who thrived in central Italy centuries before the rise of Rome, a people whose language once carried laws, prayers, songs, and laughter across the land. Today, we can see fragments of their words etched into bronze mirrors, carved into stone epitaphs, painted on the walls of their burial chambers. We can hear the faint resonance of their voice. And yet the truth remains. Their language is still only partially understood, a half-deciphered echo, a tongue that once lived in every marketplace and sanctuary of Etruria, but now lingers only as fragments of sound and symbol. When you walk through an Etruscan necropolis, cities of the dead, you see tombs adorned with inscriptions, names, family lineages, words of farewell. They lie carved into sarcophagi like whispers addressed to eternity. But while we can sound out the letters, they borrowed an alphabet descended from the Greeks. We cannot fully grasp the meanings behind the words. The script is familiar, the sound of the letters is known, but the heart of the language, its vocabulary, its grammar, its poetry, remains elusive. Imagine the frustration of hearing someone speak in clear syllables, recognizing every sound, and yet not understanding a single sentence. That is the Etruscan language, visible, pronounceable, and yet still veiled in mist. We know a little. We can identify numbers. We can read some phrases related to rituals, funerary practices, and dedications to gods. A handful of Etruscan words survived in Latin, especially in the realm of religion. Terms for priests, for sacred spaces, for rituals. They seeped into Rome like echoes swallowed by a larger voice. Words like augur and templum trace their roots back to Etruria, carrying forward the ghost of a forgotten tongue. But beyond that, silence. The greatest mystery is not only that the Etruscan language is undeciphered, but that the civilization itself was so powerful, so advanced, and yet allowed itself to be swallowed. Before Rome was Rome, Etruscan kings ruled the young city. Their engineers taught the Romans how to build roads, aqueducts, and arches. Their artists influenced Roman painting and sculpture. Their rituals guided the Roman way of communing with the gods. And yet, by the 1st century BC, their identity dissolved, their language faded, and Latin replaced it. What remains today are fragments, a bronze tablet here, a linen book wrapped around an Egyptian mummy there, funeral inscriptions etched into stone, hundreds of artifacts scattered across museums, whispering the same riddle. We are here, we once spoke, and you cannot understand us. Consider the Sippus Perusinus, a stone slab unearthed near Perugia. It contains one of the longest Etruscan texts ever found, 46 lines, over 100 words. It reads like a contract, perhaps a legal agreement between families, dealing with land or inheritance. To modern eyes, the letters line up in orderly rows, easy to trace, simple to pronounce. And yet, when scholars read it aloud, they know only fragments. This land, these people, to give, to take. The structure is visible, but the meaning is only guessed. Or think of the Liber Linteus, the linen book of Zagreb, the only known book in Etruscan. It survives only because its linen pages were cut into strips and used to wrap the body of an Egyptian mummy. Written in long horizontal lines, it likely contained rituals, liturgies, invocations to gods. Today, we can trace the flow of its syllables, but their meaning remains locked, as though the gods themselves decided that some prayers should never be fully heard again. There is a sadness in this loss, but also a strange beauty. The Etruscan language reminds us that civilizations are not only erased by conquest, but also by assimilation. Their culture did not vanish, it was absorbed. Rome ate Etruria, and in the process, became Rome. The very empire we so often celebrate, the empire that spread law, language, and architecture across the world, was itself standing on the shoulders of a civilization whose voice it silenced. But can we truly say the Etruscans are silent? Their words linger in the rituals of Roman religion, in the roots of certain Latin words, in the very soil of Italy. Their tombs still stand, painted with feasts, dances, games, and journeys to the afterlife. Their language may not be fully read, but it is still there, like music heard from another room, muffled, yet undeniable. What does it feel like to stand before one of these inscriptions? To trace your fingers along the grooves carved by hands 2.5 millennia ago? It feels like standing at the threshold of a door that refuses to open. You know that behind it is a voice, alive and urgent. You know it once told stories of gods and heroes, of lovers and warriors, of the living and the dead. But the door is locked, and the key may be lost forever. And yet, perhaps the key is not entirely gone. Scholars continue to search. Every new artifact, every new inscription, every linguistic pattern compared against other ancient tongues brings us closer. There is always the chance that someday a Rosetta Stone of the Etruscan world will appear, that the silence will break, and the voices of the dead will speak again. Until then, the Etruscans remain beneath the Roman shadow, their whispers rising like smoke from tombs. Curling into the present as unanswered questions, they remind us that history is not a solid monument, but a fragile weave of memory, one that can fray and dissolve if we do not listen carefully enough. The Etruscan language is not just undeciphered, it is a mirror. It asks us, when our voices fade, when our words are dust, what fragments will remain of us? Will anyone understand them? Or will we too become a riddle carved into stone, waiting for strangers to pronounce our syllables without hearing our meaning? The Aegean Sea glitters beneath the sun, its waters endless, restless, a mirror of blue broken only by the mountains of Crete. Here, thousands of years ago, a great civilization blossomed, the Minoans. They built palaces that seemed to breathe with light. Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, Akrotiri. They painted walls with dolphins and lilies, feasts and dances. They sailed across seas, trading with Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. And they wrote. Their words survive in clay, in tablets hardened by accidental fire. The script they used has a name, Linear A, but its meaning, that is a silence we still cannot break. Linear A was the script of the Minoans, a writing system that flourished between 1800 and 1450 BC. When archaeologists unearthed it, they quickly noticed its resemblance to a later script, Linear B. Linear B was cracked open in the 1950s by Michael Ventris, revealing itself as an early form of Greek. That breakthrough was celebrated like the discovery of a lost key. But when scholars turned the same light on Linear A, they were met with a door that would not open. Linear A looked like Linear B, yes, but the language it carried was not Greek. It was something else, something older, something without descendants in today's tongues. This is why Linear A still stands before us like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. We can read its shapes, we can assign sounds to its signs, we can even speak the words aloud, but they are words from a dead language, syllables without anchors, floating islands in a sea of silence. Imagine holding a clay tablet from Knossos in your hands. Its surface is incised with neat rows of signs, triangles, circles, strokes, little schematic figures, each one carved with care. To the Minoan scribe, these were not symbols but living words. Perhaps the tablet recorded offerings to a goddess, tallies of olive oil jars, names of merchants, invocations to the gods. To us, it is like staring at music notes from a song whose melody we cannot imagine. The notation is there, but the tune is gone. Some researchers argue that Linear A encoded a language isolate, something that shared no kinship with Greek, Latin, or even the tongues of Anatolia. Others believe it may connect distantly to early Anatolian languages, or to the Semitic family, or to something else entirely. something swallowed by history before it could leave descendants. The uncertainty lingers, like the hum of an unstruck chord. The fragments we have are tantalizing. Inscriptions on clay tablets, seals, and vessels, often short, sometimes formulaic. One recurring word seems to mark total, suggesting accounting. Another cluster may be linked to offerings of wheat, wine, or livestock. There are fragments that might refer to gods or places, names that refuse to reveal their true faces. We can map the shadows, but the light eludes us. And yet, Linear A does not feel like pure utility. There are hints of rhythm in its sequences, patterns that suggest poetry, ritual, incantation. The Minoans were a people deeply attuned to ritual. Their palaces were not fortresses, but labyrinths of light, spaces of ceremony. It seems impossible that their script was only for counting jars of oil. Somewhere in those lines are hymns sung to their goddesses, invocations whispered in shrines, the language of the labyrinth itself. But why did Linear A vanish? Around 1450 BC, the Minoan world suffered a great rupture. Some say it was the eruption of Thera, a volcanic explosion so massive it drowned cities in ash and reshaped the sea. Others say it was invasion, conquest by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. Whatever the cause, the Minoan palaces fell, and with them, Linear A was silenced. In its place, the conquerors imposed Linear B, bending the script to their own Greek tongue. The words of the Minoans were erased, overwritten by new voices. This is why Linear A haunts us. It is a language that died not because it was never written, but because it was deliberately replaced. The signs survive, but the breath behind them is gone. To stand before a Linear A tablet is to feel time's cruelty. Here are words carved in clay. Here is a voice, once loud, now strangled. It is as if you found a diary, written in letters you can pronounce but cannot comprehend. You can hear the rhythm of the writer's hand, but the story remains locked. Yet, there is also beauty in this silence. Linear A reminds us that not all mysteries demand solutions. Some invite us to sit with them, to wonder, to imagine. Perhaps the Minoans themselves would smile at our struggle, amused that their language could outlast their palaces, yet remain beyond reach. Linear A is not entirely mute. It still speaks in another way. It tells us that writing is not eternal, that even a script carved in clay can become unreadable if the culture that nourished it vanishes. It warns us of fragility, and it asks us to think, when we are gone, when our own alphabets are relics, will anyone still understand what we have written? In the end, Linear A may never be deciphered, but in its silence it still speaks. It says, we were here, we wrote, we remembered. And even if you do not know our words, you know that we lived. We often celebrate the Rosetta Stone as the key that unlocked the world of Egyptian hieroglyphs, an artifact that bridged two worlds, whispering a language long lost back into our ears. But for every Rosetta Stone that has been found, there are countless other inscriptions, silent, patient, and unyielding, that refuse to give us their voices. These are the Rosetta's silent sisters, the scripts carved into clay, etched into stone, painted on temple walls, and pressed into tablets, their meanings lost in the storm of centuries. Imagine walking into a chamber buried under sand for thousands of years, torchlight flickering across walls dense with symbols. They seem alive, lines, loops, spirals, and marks repeating in a rhythm that suggests order, intention, a system. Yet to us, they are like a lock without a key. We recognize their structure, their precision, the fact that they are not random scratches but language, and still, we cannot hear the voice behind them. The Indus Valley script, carved on seals no larger than a coin, stares at us with the defiance of silence. Its symbols, fish, bowls, spears, leaves, line up in neat arrangements. Archaeologists debate, was this a full language? Or a proto-script more symbolic than phonetic? Some say it held the poetry of merchants, others claim it was a sacred code. But no one knows for sure, because no bilingual key, no ancient Rosetta, has ever surfaced. It is as though the voices of an entire civilization, millions of people, were sealed behind glass, visible yet unreachable. Then there is Linear A, inscribed by the Minoans of Crete, the seafaring people who once ruled the Mediterranean waves. Their palaces were vast labyrinths, their art vibrant, their influence great. Yet their words, the way they thought, prayed, traded, and dreamed, remain locked in Linear A. We have Linear B, its descendant, deciphered into a Proto-Greek tongue. But linear A resists, a reminder that sometimes even languages can die, and the key to reviving them can die too. Consider the feeling of reading words you cannot read. There is a strange beauty in the symmetry of lines, the curves of letters that are not letters to you. They become patterns, designs, shapes that evoke a sense of rhythm, almost like music without sound. The Voynich manuscript, with its looping, flowing script and illustrations of plants that exist nowhere in the natural world, stands as the most famous of these silent texts. It is both language and artwork, perhaps a hoax, perhaps an encoded wisdom lost to time. To look at its pages is to stare into the face of mystery itself. A text that seems to want to be read, and yet laughs at every attempt. The Rosetta's silent sisters teach us something profound. That language is not just about words, it is about the bridges they build. A script without a reader is like a song without a listener, suspended in the air, waiting to land. And these undeciphered tongues hold not just words, but cultures. They hide myths, treaties, recipes, laws, lullabies, whole lives of people who once walked this earth, whose minds worked and hearts beat as ours do now. And here lies the haunting thought. What if some truths of our ancestors, truths about origins, about science, about spirit and cosmos, are locked inside these undeciphered languages? What if the cure to a disease, the story of creation, or the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes lies trapped in symbols that stare at us in silence? It reminds us that the past is not gone. It is waiting, hidden in stone and ink, asking us to listen more deeply. When you think of Rosetta's silent sisters, remember this. They are not just marks. They are voices, frozen. The earth is full of speechless storytellers, waiting for us to break the silence. The question is, will we ever truly hear them? The Indus Valley, stretching across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, was once the heartbeat of an advanced and thriving civilization. Around 5,000 years ago, when Egypt was raising its pyramids and Mesopotamia was writing its first cuneiform records, the Indus cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were already bustling with order, innovation, and mystery. They had grid-planned streets, advanced drainage systems, multi-storied houses, standardized weights and measures, and a sense of civic design so sophisticated that it would not reappear until millennia later in Rome. And yet, for all of this brilliance, one thing about them refuses to reveal itself: their words. On thousands of seals, tablets, pottery shards, and tools, we find tiny inscriptions, lines and shapes carved with precision. A fish, a leaf, a circle, a human-like figure, a trident. They appear in neat rows, seldom more than a few symbols long, rarely more than 5 or 6 in sequence. Some scholars believe these are not words but identifiers, signatures of merchants, ownership marks, shorthand tags for trade. Others believe they are full sentences, compressing the language of an entire civilization into forms so compact and efficient that they seem alien to us. Here is the haunting beauty of the Indus script. It looks like language. It feels like language. Its structure, its frequency, its repeated patterns mirror what we know about human communication. And yet, we cannot read even a single sentence. No Rosetta Stone has been found to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. Imagine living beside a library of thousands of books, but every page is written in a code you cannot break. That is the Indus Valley for us. The seals themselves, often no bigger than a thumbprint, carry an aura of ritual and commerce. Many feature images of animals, bulls, tigers, elephants, and the enigmatic unicorn, a creature shown with a single long horn. These animals seem symbolic, perhaps sacred, perhaps practical. Were they clan symbols, gods, totems of identity? Was the unicorn a mythical beast or a stylized representation of something real? We do not know. What we do know is that the symbols carved above or beside them are not random. They repeat in patterns, showing beginnings, middles, and endings, just like the sentences we write today. Some scholars argue the Indus script was never meant to be spoken. They say it was purely symbolic, a set of signs understood without phonetic sound, like a code used only by scribes or priests. But others insist, behind these markings was a living tongue, a language once spoken by millions, a language that carried stories, myths, contracts, and conversations. a language that now lies buried under 5,000 years of silence. The tragedy of the Indus whispers is not only that we cannot read them, it is that we cannot hear their world. What did the Indus people call themselves? What names did they give their gods? How did they explain the stars, the rivers, the mysteries of life? Every other ancient civilization we know speaks to us through texts. The hymns of Sumer, the prayers of Egypt, the laws of Babylon. But the Indus Valley, despite being equally great, speaks to us only through its silence. And yet, in silence, there is a strange power. It forces us to look closer, to notice details. The standardized weights suggest a people obsessed with fairness in trade. The carefully designed drains suggest a society valuing cleanliness, health, and public good. The recurring images on seals suggest deep spiritual or cultural meaning. Even without their words, the Indus left us a message. They were advanced, they were organized, they were thoughtful. Still, one cannot help but feel a yearning, a thirst to know more. Imagine what we might learn if we deciphered even a fragment of their language. Perhaps we would read a prayer to a goddess of fertility, a hymn sung during planting season, or a trade record showing distant connections with Mesopotamia and beyond. Or perhaps, hidden in their words, lies a map, a guide to how they saw the cosmos, the secret rhythms that ordered their lives. And here is where the whispers become haunting. Some linguists believe the Indus tongue was an ancestor of the Dravidian languages still spoken in southern India today. Tamil, Kannada, Telugu. If true, then perhaps echoes of their speech still live on in the modern world, hidden in everyday words spoken by millions. But without the key, without the Rosetta to unlock them, we cannot bridge past and present. The whispers remain whispers, tantalizing but unreachable. What makes the Indus Valley even more mysterious is its sudden disappearance. Around 1900 BCE, their great cities began to decline. Floods, droughts, invasions. Many theories exist, but no one can say for certain. They left no records, no chronicles of their fall, only the ruins of their cities, only the seals of their symbols. A civilization that flourished for centuries, then vanished without leaving behind the sound of its voice. The Indus whispers remind us that silence is not the absence of story. It is the presence of a story we cannot yet hear. Every seal, every mark is a door locked to us. And perhaps one day, someone will find the key. Perhaps one day the Indus Valley will finally speak again. And when it does, it may tell us not only who they were, but who we are and how deeply connected we are to those ancient, forgotten voices. Far out in the shimmering waters of the Mediterranean lies the island of Crete, home to a people whose legacy is tangled with myth, labyrinths, and gods that walked among mortals. The Minoans, named after the legendary King Minos, were among the most advanced civilizations of the Bronze Age. Their frescoes tell of vibrant dancers, leaping bulls, priestesses draped in flowing robes, and ships that sailed across the seas with power and grace. Their palaces, particularly at Knossos, seemed like cities within cities, filled with corridors and chambers that gave birth to the myth of the labyrinth itself. Yet behind all this beauty and complexity, they left us something even more tantalizing: a script, a language known as Linear A, a language that, to this day, refuses to yield its meaning. Linear A is a series of symbols pressed into clay tablets, inscribed onto vessels, and carved into sacred offerings. When first discovered, it seemed like the Minoans had left us a written record of their daily lives, their rituals, their gods. And indeed, in form it resembles writing, orderly, patterned, purposeful. But there is a catch. We cannot read it. We know it is writing. We know it carried meaning. Yet the meaning is sealed away, locked in strokes and shapes that resist every attempt to break them open. The great twist of the story comes with the discovery of another script, Linear B, used by the Mycenaeans, who inherited much from the Minoans. Linear B was deciphered in the 1950s and revealed itself to be an early form of Greek. This gave scholars hope. If Linear B could be read, then surely its predecessor, Linear A, could also be unlocked. But when they compared the two, they found a cruel paradox. The symbols were similar, the writing systems related, yet the language behind Linear A was not Greek. It was something else entirely, something older, something lost. Imagine the frustration. You recognize the letters, you can even sound them out, but the words themselves belong to no known tongue. It would be like being handed a modern sentence spelled out in familiar letters, only to realize the words are from a language that has never been recorded. That is the puzzle of Linear A. The symbols speak, but the voice is foreign, unreachable. What makes this even more compelling is the setting in which Linear A was used. Many of the tablets seem administrative, lists of goods, offerings, trade items. The Minoans were master traders, sending their ships across the Mediterranean, connecting Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Linear A may have recorded these exchanges, marking who gave what, who received what, and which gods were honored in the process. If we could read it, we might see the entire economy of a great Bronze Age civilization open before us. But Linear A was not just for trade. Some inscriptions appear in religious contexts, on libation vessels, in sacred caves, on ritual items. These suggest prayers, hymns, invocations to deities. The Minoan religion was steeped in nature, fertility, and cycles of life and death. Their goddess figures loom large in their art. Bulls and snakes reappear again and again as sacred symbols. Imagine the hymns sung in their sanctuaries, the chants whispered as offerings were poured onto altars, the myths recited in caves by torchlight. All of it is there, frozen in Linear A, waiting to be heard. Yet silence reigns. Every attempt to decipher it ends in uncertainty. Some scholars argue the language behind Linear A may have been unrelated to any we know today, a linguistic orphan. Others suggest it might connect faintly to the Anatolian languages of Asia Minor, or to the early forms of Etruscan, or even to a lost pre-Indo-European tongue of the Mediterranean. The truth is, we simply do not know. The voice behind Linear A remains faceless. Here, the myth of the labyrinth seems almost prophetic. The Minoans gave us the story of Theseus wandering the endless corridors, searching for the Minotaur. In a way, Linear A is the same labyrinth, an intellectual maze with passages that twist and turn but lead to dead ends. We wander its corridors, following patterns and guesses, only to find ourselves trapped, unable to reach the heart of the mystery. Yet perhaps that is the point. Linear A reminds us that not all knowledge is easily given. Some truths must be earned slowly, across centuries of persistence. The Minoans were a people who thrived on mystery, on ritual, on the interplay of myth and reality. Maybe their language carries that same essence, something meant to challenge, to test, to elude. What strikes us most deeply is the silence. The Minoans were not voiceless. They were vibrant, artistic, expressive. Their frescoes shout with color. Their palaces hum with activity. Their myths echo across time. And yet, their actual words, their poems, their contracts, their daily chatter remain hidden. It is like seeing a dancer move without ever hearing the music she dances to. Beautiful, but incomplete. If one day Linear A is deciphered, the floodgates will open. We may read their prayers, their myths, their laws. We may find connections between Crete and Egypt, Crete and Mesopotamia, threads that tie civilizations together in ways we never suspected. We may even find that their worldview, how they understood time, divinity, life, and death, holds insights that could still inspire us today. But for now, Linear A remains a labyrinth without an exit, a script that mocks our cleverness, that whispers without letting us hear the words. It is a reminder that the past holds secrets beyond our reach, and that sometimes, mystery itself is the most powerful echo of all. In the dense jungles of ancient Mesoamerica, long before the rise of the Maya and the grandeur of the Aztec Empire, there lived a mysterious people we call the Olmecs. They are often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the root from which later civilizations drew inspiration. They flourished between 1200 and 400 BCE, leaving behind colossal stone heads with serene, enigmatic expressions, faces carved in basalt, weighing tons, staring across centuries with eyes that seem alive even in stillness. But these monumental sculptures are not their only legacy. Scattered among their ruins, carved into stone and etched into fragments, lie inscriptions, symbols, lines, and marks that whisper of language. A language we still cannot read. The Olmecs were a people of mystery in every sense. We know them through their art, their influence on later cultures, their architecture, and their mythology, traces that survive in the traditions of those who came after them. But their own voice, their written word, eludes us. Unlike the Maya, who developed a complex and deciphered hieroglyphic system, the Olmecs left only fragments, a handful of inscriptions carved into monuments and objects. Most famously, the so-called Cascajal block, a slab of serpentine stone discovered in Veracruz, Mexico, covered with 62 distinct symbols arranged in rows. The Cascajal block is regarded by some as the earliest evidence of writing in the Americas. Its symbols are unlike Maya glyphs and unlike any known system. There are shapes that resemble insects, maize plants, thrones, even masks. Some symbols repeat, suggesting rules, grammar, patterns of speech, but no one knows how to read them. Some scholars argue it is true writing, an entire script recording the spoken Olmec tongue. Others suggest it is proto-writing, a symbolic system used for ritual or ceremony. The block, like the colossal heads, holds a presence that feels almost intentional, like it was meant to outlast its creators, meant to carry their thoughts across time. And yet, without the key, it stares at us as silently as those great basalt faces. Imagine if we could hear it. What stories might the Olmecs have told? Their civilization was one of the first to carve myths into stone, to shape gods that blurred the line between jaguar and human, between earth and sky. Their religion was filled with hybrids, creatures that were half animal, half divine. They saw sacredness in the jaguar, the serpent, the bird. Perhaps their inscriptions carried prayers to these gods, asking for rain, fertility, protection. Or perhaps they were chronicles of rulers, records of trade, or myths of creation that later found echoes in Maya and Aztec traditions. But here lies the paradox of the Olmecs. We see their influence everywhere, but we cannot hear their original voice. Later Mesoamerican cultures preserved echoes of their myths, like the jaguar gods, the rain deities, the sacred ball game, but they translated them into their own languages, reshaping them through centuries. The Olmecs themselves remain shadows. Their silent stones are all we have. When one stands before an Olmec monument, there is a strange weight in the air. The heads, carved with astonishing skill, show individuals with unique features, as if portraits of rulers or warriors. They radiate a sense of presence, watchers from another time. And near them, inscriptions on altars and artifacts add another layer. These stones do not merely depict, they speak, or at least they once did. Now, their language is a closed door, a locked chamber, whose key is buried beneath centuries of soil and silence. The Cascajal block itself raises haunting questions. Was it a ritual tablet, a sacred message, a political record? Did it represent the beginning of literacy in the Americas? A spark that would later ignite in Maya glyphs? If so, then it is not just a fragment. It is the seed of a written tradition that shaped an entire continent. And if it truly is writing, then the Olmecs were not only sculptors and myth-makers, but also the first scribes of the New World. The silence of the Olmec language leaves us restless, because language is identity. It is thought preserved, culture encoded, humanity given permanence. Without their words, we see their art but cannot hear their intentions. We know their gods but not their prayers. We see their monuments but not their chronicles. We walk in their abandoned plazas but cannot understand the conversations that once filled them. And yet, there is beauty in the unknown. To look upon the Olmec stones is to be reminded that civilizations are not only about what they leave, but about what they conceal. Their silence invites us to imagine, to listen not with our ears but with our intuition, to see language not only as words on a page, but as mystery carved into the bones of the earth. Perhaps one day, some breakthrough will come. Perhaps a bilingual text, hidden beneath layers of soil, will emerge like a Rosetta Stone of the Americas, allowing us to hear the Olmecs at last. Or perhaps their language will remain forever undeciphered, a reminder that not all mysteries exist to be solved. Some exist to remind us of the limits of human knowing, of the humbling silence that lies beyond the reach of our cleverness. For now, the silent stones of the Olmecs remain exactly that, silent. And yet in their silence they speak. They remind us of the fragility of memory, the impermanence of voice, the way whole civilizations can be reduced to echoes carved into stone. Their language is not gone, it is only sleeping. It waits, in jungles and museums, for the day when human curiosity is clever enough or patient enough to wake it again. There are puzzles that whisper, and then there are puzzles that sing in riddles, daring us to follow their melody into places beyond reason. Among all the undeciphered languages, none holds the world in its grip of fascination quite like the Voynich manuscript. It is not merely a text, It is an enigma clothed in parchment, an oracle of nonsense that feels like it should make sense, a book that seems alive, mocking us with every turn of its fragile pages. Bound in calfskin, its ink faded yet clear enough to be seen, the Voynich manuscript is dated by radiocarbon testing to the early 15th century. But where it came from, who wrote it, and why, are questions that gnaw at scholars, cryptographers, and dreamers alike. It is a book filled with over 200 pages of looping, fluid script, letters that flow with elegance and rhythm, repeating in patterns like a true language, yet it belongs to no known family of writing. No alphabet, no grammar, no spoken tongue we have ever encountered aligns with its strange script. At first glance, it almost tricks you into believing it's readable. The words are neatly arranged, with margins, paragraphs, and even punctuation-like marks. Certain words repeat in ways we would expect in natural language, like and or the in English. It feels structured, purposeful, intentional. But every attempt to decode it, from the world's greatest cryptographers to the brute force of modern algorithms, has failed. The Voynich manuscript laughs at us from across the centuries, as if it is a mirror showing us the limits of our own cleverness. Yet the script is only half the strangeness. The illustrations that accompany it plunge the reader into a dreamscape. There are plants, some resembling real species, others utterly fantastical, hybrids that seem to grow only in imagination. There are diagrams that look like astronomical charts, star wheels, and celestial maps. There are pages filled with women bathing in green pools connected by pipes, as if they were caught in some strange ritual or cosmic plumbing system. There are charts of herbs, recipes, zodiac signs, and inexplicable symbols. It is as if the manuscript is a guidebook to a world we have never visited, a manual of a science we do not know, a scripture for a religion that never spread beyond a single hidden sect. Some call it a hoax, a medieval prank meant to fool a wealthy collector. Yet the consistency of the script, its statistical resemblance to natural language, its intricately designed systems, makes it hard to dismiss as nonsense. A true hoax would likely collapse under its own contradictions. But the Voynich manuscript endures, page after page, with a logic that feels real, even if we cannot touch it. Over the centuries, the manuscript has passed through many hands. It was once owned by Emperor Rudolf II of the Holy Roman Empire, who reportedly believed it to be the work of Roger Bacon, a 13th century English philosopher. Later, it was studied by Jesuit scholars, hidden in libraries, rediscovered in antiquarian shops. In the 20th century, it landed in the hands of cryptographers, including those who had cracked enemy codes in world wars. They too failed. Today it rests at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, its pages digitized for all to see, yet its secrets remain locked. Theories swirl endlessly. Some say it is an elaborate code concealing forbidden knowledge. Others argue it is a medicinal text, recording plants and remedies in a language invented to keep them secret. Some think it is a memory palace, a device for storing information visually. Others claim it is the work of an alien mind or a traveler from a parallel world. And some, more skeptical, insist it is nothing at all, a trick, a meaningless jumble that only appears to hold meaning because we so desperately want it to. But perhaps that is its true genius. The Voynich manuscript forces us to question the nature of language itself. What is a language if no one can understand it? What is meaning if it cannot be unlocked? Perhaps it was never meant to be read by us. Perhaps it was a private scripture, meant only for the eyes of its creator. Or perhaps it was written as a gift to the future, a test of patience, a mirror for generations to see their longing reflected. In truth, the manuscript feels less like a book and more like a dream captured in ink. Its script flows like the speech of a tongue spoken in sleep. Its plants resemble those glimpsed in half-remembered visions. Its diagrams resemble maps not of Earth, but of inner consciousness, of places where imagination is geography. To read it, or rather, to fail to read it, is to feel the boundary between reality and dream dissolve. And maybe that is the point. Maybe the Voynich manuscript does not need to be solved. Maybe its gift is in its refusal to yield. It teaches us humility, reminding us that not everything in history was meant to be decoded. Some things were meant to remain sacred mysteries, keeping the fire of wonder alive. For if every text could be read, if every puzzle could be solved, would we still have reason to dream of what lies beyond? Still, the the yearning persists. Somewhere in those 240 pages might lie lost remedies, forgotten sciences, ancient cosmologies, or perhaps a single word, a name that would anchor the manuscript in our history instead of leaving it adrift in its timeless haze. Until then, the Voynich manuscript remains a book of nowhere, a book without a place, without a tongue, without a voice, except the one it awakens in us, the voice of awe, curiosity, and the unending hunger to know. And so it sits, silent but alive, like a dream written on paper, a book that feels as if it knows us better than we know it. Imagine the island of Rapa Nui, far away in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, a land so isolated, so distant from the continents, that it feels like a fragment of another world. This is Easter Island, the home of the giant stone guardians, the Moai, whose stoic faces watch silently over the land and the sea. Yet, beneath the towering presence of these statues, there lies another enigma, one carved not in stone, but into wooden tablets, an undeciphered script, a written voice of a lost tradition known as Rongorongo. The first thing that captures attention about Rongorongo is its beauty. The script flows in elegant, almost hypnotic patterns. The characters are not letters in the way we know them, but intricate glyphs, human figures, birds, fish, plants, crescents, and abstract shapes, arranged in neat lines across wooden tablets. Each symbol seems alive, as if it carries not only meaning but movement, a gesture, a memory of an ancient story. And yet, though we gaze at these glyphs, we cannot read them. They remain mute, a sealed treasure chest without a key. Some believe Rongorongo is a system of writing, recording myths, genealogies, and rituals of the Rapa Nui people. Others argue that it may not be writing at all, but a mnemonic device, something closer to a memory aid, used by trained specialists to recall chants and oral traditions. Both possibilities carry weight, but the truth remains hidden behind silence. The challenge lies not only in the script itself, but in its history. When European explorers arrived on Easter Island in the 18th century, they found no one who could read Rongorongo. Colonization, disease, slavery, and cultural collapse swept across the island like a tidal wave, erasing generations of memory. The knowledge of how to read the glyphs, if indeed they represented a full writing system, was lost forever. By the time scholars began studying the tablets, the chain of transmission had already been broken. Even the very survival of these tablets is miraculous. Carved on wood in a land with little forest, many were destroyed or repurposed by the islanders when the sacred value of the symbols faded. Only a handful, barely 24, remain today, scattered in museums across the world. Each tablet is a relic, a fragile voice from the past, carried far from the shores where it was born. One of the most fascinating aspects of Rongorongo is the way it is written, a style known as reverse boustrophodon. Imagine reading a line of text from left to right, then flipping the tablet upside down to read the next line. The writing zigzags back and forth, almost like the weaving of cloth or the turning of soil by a plough. This unique style suggests a deep symbolic system at work, something that may have connected reading with ritual, rhythm, and memory. Attempts to decipher the script have often mirrored the frustrations faced with the Indus Valley or Linear A. Linguists search for patterns, repeating sequences or clues that might connect the glyphs to known Polynesian languages. Some claim to have found fragments of meaning, a glyph that might represent a fish, another that might mean a deity, or a calendar system tied to lunar cycles. But without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that could bridge the known and the unknown, these attempts remain speculative. And yet, Rongorongo's mystery goes deeper. The very existence of a script on such an isolated island challenges our understanding of history. Did the Rapa Nui invent writing independently, one of only a handful of societies in human history to do so? Or was it inspired by contact, perhaps with Europeans, perhaps with South American cultures across the ocean? If it was independent, then Rongorongo represents one of humanity's rarest achievements, the spontaneous birth of a writing system. If it was borrowed, it still shows the remarkable creativity of the islanders, reshaping foreign ideas into something uniquely their own. As we imagine the people of Rapa Nui chanting, carving, and passing down these tablets, we cannot help but feel the weight of their silence now. The script remains unread, the stories locked away. We look at the glyphs and sense they are speaking, but the sound is lost in the ocean of time. Perhaps this is what makes Rongorongo so haunting. It is not only an undeciphered text, but a symbol of memory itself. How easily knowledge can vanish, how fragile tradition can be. Once there were voices that knew how to read these signs. Once there were elders who carried the songs, the myths, the cosmology of their people in the flowing lines of glyphs. Today, all we have are the signs without the sound, the gestures without the meaning. And so, Rongorongo sits in museums, waiting. Scholars continue their work, scanning the tablets, digitizing the patterns, comparing them against vast databases of languages and symbols. Each attempt brings us closer, perhaps, to understanding, but perhaps the true meaning will always remain elusive. A reminder that not all mysteries can be solved, that some echoes of civilization are meant to remain whispers. What remains, then, is the poetry of mystery itself. When we look at Rongorongo, we are not just looking at a lost script. We are looking at the fragility of human memory, the resilience of culture, and the inevitability of silence. The wooden tablets are not only relics of Rapa Nui, they are mirrors reflecting our own dependence on memory, tradition, and the written word. They ask us, what would happen if our languages vanished tomorrow? Who would remember our stories? Rongorongo may never reveal its full truth, but in its silence, it tells us something profound. That meaning does not only lie in words, but in the persistence of mystery, in the questions that keep us searching, in the awareness that the past still holds secrets we cannot fully grasp. Like the moai that gaze across the horizon, Rongorongo looks back at us, unreadable yet deeply present, echoing the voices of a world that is gone and yet still here. In the lush rainforests of Mesoamerica, where the air is thick with humidity and the earth breathes with ancient roots, there once thrived a people whose name carries the weight of myth, the Olmecs. Long before the rise of the Maya, centuries before the grandeur of Teotihuacan or the Aztec Empire, the Olmecs carved colossal heads from stone and built the foundations of what we call civilization in the Americas. And within their artistry, their ritual, and their architecture, they left behind an enigma, symbols and glyphs that may represent one of the earliest writing systems in the Western Hemisphere. The Olmecs are often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Around 1200 BCE, their cities, San Lorenzo, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, rose among rivers and jungles filled with ceremonial platforms, pyramids, and plazas. They carved jaguars, serpents, and hybrid beings, fusing the human with the divine. They raised colossal stone heads, some weighing over 20 tons, each with individualized features, helmets, and gazes that feel piercing even today. These works speak to sophistication, power, and vision. Yet among their greatest gifts is something far subtler, the possibility of writing. Archaeologists have uncovered stone monuments, portable figurines, and even a handful of artifacts inscribed with strange marks, swirls, dots, bars, and stylized forms. One of the most famous discoveries is the Cascajal block, unearthed in 1999 near Veracruz, Mexico. It is a slab of serpentine stone covered with 62 incised symbols arranged in horizontal rows. The glyphs are unlike any other Mesoamerican script known at the time. Neither Maya hieroglyphs nor Zapotec script, but something older, something unique. Some symbols resemble plants, insects, thrones, and abstract shapes. Scholars debate, is this writing, or simply proto-writing, an intermediate stage between art and language? The importance of the Cascajal block cannot be overstated. If indeed it is a true script, it would be the earliest known writing in the Americas, dating to around 900 BCE. That would mean the Olmecs not only carved monumental art, but also encoded thought into symbols, creating a system of communication that preceded and possibly influenced the later Maya script. Imagine that, the very roots of Mesoamerican writing stretching back into the Olmec jungles, where shamans and rulers once walked. But here lies the challenge. With so few examples, and with no bilingual text, decipherment seems almost impossible. We cannot even be certain that the Cascajal symbols represent a full language. Were they used to record myths, ritual chants, calendrical events, or were they symbols of lineage and power, carved only for elite use? Without more examples, without context, the mystery remains unsolved. Other Olmec artifacts add to the puzzle. On monuments and stelae, carved figures are sometimes accompanied by glyph-like symbols, often in association with rulers or gods. Some scholars suggest these may represent names or titles, much like later Maya glyphs. Others believe they could be calendrical signs, tied to cycles of time and cosmic order. After all, the Olmecs were astronomers as much as artisans, their ceremonial centers aligned with celestial bodies, reflecting a worldview where earth, sky, and underworld were bound together by ritual and time. Think for a moment about what it means to invent writing. It is not merely a tool for record keeping. It is a transformation of consciousness. When a culture begins to inscribe its thoughts, its myths, its memories into durable form, something changes forever. Oral traditions, beautiful and powerful as they are, can shift and adapt with each telling. But writing freezes memory into permanence. It allows a ruler to declare his power to future generations. It allows a shaman to encode rituals beyond the frailty of memory. It allows a civilization to echo across centuries. If the Olmecs truly created writing, then they were not only artists and builders, they were among the first in human history to capture the essence of language itself. This possibility changes how we understand the flow of culture across Mesoamerica. It suggests that the later flowering of Maya hieroglyphics was not born in isolation, but rooted in earlier experiments, earlier scripts, earlier hands that dared to carve thought into stone. And yet, there is silence. The Cascajal block sits in a museum, a puzzle without a key. Scholars debate its authenticity, its meaning, its purpose. Some argue it is not writing at all, but symbolic notation, perhaps tied to religious offerings. Others insist it shows enough variety, enough repetition, enough structured pattern to be genuine writing. But with only one such artifact, certainty eludes us. Consider the fragility of memory once more. How many Olmec texts might have existed? Perhaps they carved their words not only in stone but also on wood, bark, or textiles, materials long since decayed in the damp jungles. Perhaps there were once libraries of ritual knowledge destroyed by time. We are left only with fragments, and from these fragments we must dream. What makes the Olmec glyphs so haunting is that they embody both presence and absence. We can see them, they are real, carved with intention, but we cannot hear their voice. They hover on the threshold of language, whispering to us across 3,000 years. They remind us that history is not only about what survives, but also about what is lost, what vanishes into silence, leaving us with echoes. Imagine then, an Olmec priest standing before the Cascajal block, running his fingers across the carved symbols as he recites a chant. Imagine a ruler commissioning the stone, his name inscribed in glyphs that no living person today can read. Imagine children learning to recognize these signs, not as pictures, but as carriers of meaning, of lineage, of cosmic order. Imagine the moment when sound became symbol, when breath became stone. That moment, invisible to us now, may have changed the destiny of the Americas forever. And yet, like Rongorongo on Rapa Nui, the Olmec script resists us. It does not yield easily to modern analysis. No computer algorithm, no linguistic database, no scholarly intuition has cracked its code. Perhaps one day more artifacts will be found. Another block, another tablet, another fragment of writing that will bridge the gap. Or perhaps the rainforest has swallowed them forever, keeping their secrets as part of the Earth's memory. In this sense, the Olmec glyphs embody a lesson. They remind us of the impermanence of knowledge, the fragility of human creation, and the humbling truth that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. We want answers, we crave clarity, but sometimes the silence itself is the message. The Olmecs carved their symbols, they sang their chants, they lived their cosmology, and for them, that was enough. The fact that we cannot read their words does not erase their meaning. It only deepens the mystery. For us today, the Cascajal block is more than a puzzle. It is a mirror. It asks us to reflect on our own age, filled with digital words, endless archives, and the illusion of permanence. What will remain of us 3,000 years from now? What fragments will future archaeologists hold in their hands, trying to reconstruct our vanished voices? The Olmec glyphs remind us that civilizations are not defined only by what they leave behind, but also by what slips away, and perhaps, in their silence, they echo a deeper truth. That language, writing, and meaning are not eternal. They are fragile flames, easily extinguished, easily forgotten, waiting for those who come after to kindle them once more. Let us journey back more than 4,000 years to a land that breathed with rivers, trade, and ritual, the great Indus Valley civilization. Here, between the flowing arms of the Indus and Sarasvati rivers, arose one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated urban cultures. Vast cities such as Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Lothal, and Dholavira spread across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. They were cities of order, with straight streets, brick houses, drainage systems, granaries, and marketplaces that spoke of organization far beyond their time. Yet, among their many wonders lies one of the most tantalizing enigmas of the ancient world: their undeciphered script. Scattered across seals, pottery, tablets, and amulets, the Indus script whispers to us in signs, tiny, precise carvings, each one carefully etched into stone or clay. These symbols number in the hundreds, most often appearing in short sequences, rarely more than 5 to 10 characters long. Some resemble fish, birds, plants, or tools. Others are abstract, lines, circles, or geometric patterns. To the people of the Indus Valley, these were not mere decorations. They were signs that carried meaning, a language of their own. But what did they say? For decades, scholars have tried to answer that question. And yet, unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which yielded to the Rosetta Stone, the Indus script has remained silent. No bilingual inscriptions have been found, no long texts, no keys to unlock the code. We are left with fragments, signs on seals used for trade, marks on pottery, impressions on clay. We know they meant something, but we do not know what. The challenge is immense. The brevity of the inscriptions makes it difficult to identify grammatical patterns. Imagine trying to reconstruct English from nothing but words carved onto rings or stamped into coins. King, trade, property, temple. Without longer texts, without context, the logic of the system slips through our fingers. Some argue the script represents a true writing system, encoding a spoken language. Others claim it may be proto-writing, symbols tied to ritual or ownership, but not full language. Still others believe the script may have been mnemonic, aiding memory rather than representing words in full. The debate deepens when we ask, what language did the Indus people speak? Some suggest it was Dravidian, the ancestor of Tamil and other southern Indian languages. Others argue for connections to early Indo-Aryan tongues. A few even claim it represents a language family now entirely extinct, with no descendants to guide us. Each theory has evidence, but none is conclusive. Consider the famous Pashupati seal. It depicts a horned figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals, with Indus signs carved above. Some see in this figure an early prototype of Shiva, the great god of Hindu tradition. Others see a shaman, a lord of beasts, a mediator between worlds. The signs above may record his name, his title, his divinity, but without the ability to read them, we are left with guesswork. The seal whispers but does not speak. Or consider the thousands of seals bearing animal motifs: unicorns, bulls, elephants, tigers, each paired with brief inscriptions. Were these marks of merchants, tokens of trade, signatures of families, prayers to gods? The animals may have had symbolic power, but the script alongside them carried the essence of meaning. If only we could understand those few symbols, we might unlock entire networks of economy, religion, and politics. What makes the Indus mystery even more haunting is that it is not simply about one city or one artifact. It is about an entire civilization, a people who built cities larger than their Mesopotamian contemporaries, who engineered wells and baths, who organized trade stretching from Mesopotamia to Central Asia. A people who lived, thrived, and eventually disappeared, leaving behind ruins that speak of order and design, but no decipherable voice. Unlike Egypt, where tombs and temples overflow with hieroglyphic texts, the Indus left no grand inscriptions carved in stone walls. Their words remain delicate, fleeting, confined to seals and shards that fit into the palm of one's hand. This silence creates a strange paradox. We know the Indus were literate, or at least symbolically sophisticated, yet their world is mute to us. Imagine walking through the streets of Mohenjo-daro, where life once flowed. Children played by the wells. Merchants weighed goods in the market. Priests performed rituals in the Great Bath. Around you, signs were everywhere. On doors, on amulets, on trade goods. Yet to your eyes, they are only marks. You hear the voices of people, but you cannot understand them. Their language slips past you like wind through reeds. That is how it feels to study the Indus Valley today. And so, the theories multiply. Some scholars believe the script was never meant to be read by all, but was the secret code of elites or priests, deliberately obscured. Others suggest the script may have been tied to ritual performance, where meaning was embodied in action rather than sound. Still others argue that our very assumption, that it is writing may be flawed, that the signs were symbolic markers of identity, closer to heraldic crests than to sentences. But then, what about repetition, pattern, structure? Linguists analyzing the script find that the distribution of symbols follows rules similar to known languages. Certain signs often appear at the beginning, others at the end, suggesting grammar-like order. The script behaves like writing, yet without longer texts, certainty slips away. There is also the question of why it ended. Around 1900 BCE, the great Indus cities began to decline. Climate change, shifting rivers, and the breakdown of trade may have brought about their collapse. As urban life faded, so too did the script. No later civilization borrowed it, no memory of it survived in oral tradition. Unlike hieroglyphs or cuneiform, which left echoes in later scripts, the Indus signs were swallowed whole by time. And so, we are left with the most haunting possibility that we may never know. That the Indus script, unlike Linear B or Egyptian hieroglyphs, may never be deciphered. That an entire civilization's voice will remain silent forever. Yet, even in its silence, it teaches us. It shows us that human expression takes many forms, that writing is not inevitable, not universal, but fragile. It reminds us that knowledge can vanish, not only languages, but entire systems of thought. It humbles us before the scale of history, showing how even the most advanced of civilizations can fall into silence. And perhaps there is a deeper poetry here. Perhaps the Indus people did not need their script to survive beyond them. Perhaps their legacy is not in words, but in stone, in water, in order. Their cities stand as testimony to human ingenuity. Their script, undeciphered, adds mystery to their memory. It is as if they chose to leave us a puzzle, to remind us that not all echoes are meant to be understood. Some are meant simply to remind us of how much we do not know. As we gaze upon the tiny seals of the Indus, we are reminded of our own fragility. What will remain of our words, our languages, thousands of years from now? What scripts of today will be unread tomorrow? The Indus script, silent as it is, carries a message that civilizations do not vanish entirely. They echo, and sometimes their strongest echo is not in what they said, but in what they left unsaid. And so, dear traveler, we have wandered together through shadows of time, through scripts etched into wood, into stone, into clay. We have listened to the murmurs of civilizations long vanished, their voices carried in symbols we cannot read, their echoes drifting across centuries. The Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island, the glyphs of the Olmecs, the signs of the Indus Valley, all whisper to us from the edge of silence. They remind us of the fragility of memory, of how easily knowledge can be lost, and how even the greatest of civilizations can fall into wordless echoes. Yet within that silence lies beauty, for mystery itself is a kind of language, one that speaks to our imagination, one that invites us to listen with wonder rather than certainty. Now, I want to ask you something. Which of these undeciphered languages touched you the most? Was it the wooden glyphs of Rongorongo, carved on a lonely island in the Pacific? The early symbols of the Olmecs, hidden in the jungles of Mesoamerica? Or the quiet, unbroken signs of the Indus Valley, written on seals that fit into the palm of your hand? Tell me in the comments. Share the one that lingers in your mind tonight. And if you felt a spark of curiosity, if you enjoyed walking this path through mystery with me, I ask you to leave a like. Let your light shine back to this space, so others may find it too. Subscribe if you wish to join me again on journeys into forgotten worlds, where silence speaks and echoes never fade. Share this with someone who loves mysteries, with someone who dreams of ancient civilizations, with someone who still believes that the past has secrets to reveal. The unknown has no end, and together we will keep exploring it. For every undeciphered symbol is not only a puzzle, it is an invitation to wonder, to imagine, to keep searching for meaning in the quiet spaces of history. Until we meet again, may your dreams tonight be filled with forgotten languages, with symbols that glow softly in the dark, with echoes that drift across oceans of time. This is Mind Peace, and I thank you for walking with me. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, the silence of the past is never empty. It is filled with echoes, waiting for us to listen.